Hello, my name is Jenny Thorvaldson. I'm the Chief Economist and Director of Data Development here at IMPLAN. And today I'm going to talk to you about redefinitions. Now, this is a term that possibly some of you have heard of before and have an idea of what we're going to be talking about. Some of you may have never heard of that term and what it might mean. So today we're just going to talk about what it means and why we have this thing called redefinitions and how it influences the IMPLAN data. So even if you haven't heard of redefinitions in that process, it probably does influence the data that you're looking at in IMPLAN. And so that's what we're going to do today. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And I will start this presentation. All right, so we're basically going to talk about what are redefinitions, what is that process, and why do we do it, and how does it affect IMPLAN? Okay, so what are redefinitions? Well, the redefinitions are a practice performed by the Bureau of Economic Analysis, or BEA, when they release their benchmark IO tables. Okay, what are the benchmark IO tables? So IO here stands for input-output, just like IMPLAN is an input-output model. And the benchmark IO tables are critical, completely crucial for any input-output modeling system like IMPLAN. And they are released every 5 years, and they are critical to input-output models because they are our source of industry production functions, also known as the use matrix, which basically is the list and amount of all the inputs that each industry in an economy has to buy to make what they make. So that is basically the inter-industry interactions. Okay, is our industry production functions. So that way we know which industries buy from which other industries and things like that, based on what commodities they have to buy. It also gives us our industry byproducts, which is basically the make matrix. And so that gives us which commodities each industry makes and in which proportions, because a lot of industries make more than one commodity. And some commodities can be made by more than one industry. We also get from the BEA benchmark, we get government spending patterns, investment spending patterns. We actually also get foreign trade of services. It's our only source for that. We get margins. And most importantly for today's topic is we get the redefinitions matrix. So we're going to talk about that in more specific detail today. One thing to note before we move on is that the benchmark IO tables are at the national level. There aren't any sub-national regional benchmark IO tables for the US at this point. Okay, so redefinitions are made when or are undertaken. The redefinitions process happens when the input structure for a secondary product of an industry differs significantly from the input structure for the primary product of that industry. So basically what that means is if an industry makes two products, a primary product and a secondary product or a byproduct, but the input structure for both of those commodities varies significantly, that's when redefinitions come into play. And in such cases, all the economic activity associated with that secondary product, so the output, employment, labor income, all those economic variables we have that are associated with the secondary product is redefined. It's taken out from the industry in which it's a byproduct and placed into the industry in which it is the primary product. And the reason the BEA does this is that it allows for more accurate estimates of indirect impacts. And we're going to see some specific examples, and this is going to make a lot more sense when we do. So some examples would be a hotel-owned restaurant. Okay, so suppose there's restaurant activity within a hotel and it's not a brand name, some other restaurant, it's owned by the hotel and run by the hotel. That restaurant activity gets moved out of the hotel industry and gets placed into the appropriate restaurant industry. Okay, and that's, and also, okay, and then so similarly, hotel casinos, that casino activity is moved out of the hotel industry and placed into the gambling industry. And by activity, I mean that output, the output that's associated with the casino, the employment that's associated just with the casino portion of the hotel, that activity is taken out of the hotel sector. So we remove employment and output, labor income from the hotel industry, and we put it into the gambling industry. Well, this is important because producing casino activities and gambling services takes a different set of inputs than it does to run a hotel. And that's what they're getting at. They're saying, hey, running a casino is pretty different than running a hotel. So we're going to separate those, that activity and put it into the casino sector so that we get more, our activity is more in line with the inputs required. Okay, and that generates, makes for more accurate induced effects, or excuse me, indirect effects. Okay, some more examples. I'll continue on. Scientific research and development activity that is let's suppose conducted by the hospital industry is moved from the hospital industry into the industry that is scientific R&D. And construction activities that are performed by any other industry is taken out of those industries and moved into the construction industries. Okay, so other industries and institutions' purchases of these redefined activities are also moved. So any industry or institution that purchases restaurant meals will make that purchase from the restaurant industries, not from the hotel industry. Okay, and any industry or institution purchasing casino activity will do so from the gambling industry, not from the hotel industry. And so on and so forth. Same for R&D and same for construction. Now, I put industry or institution here because institutions include governments and households and things like that. And those institutions also make purchases. And so it can be industry or institutions. So these redefinitions affect all purchasers of these things. Okay. Secondary products of an industry that are produced using inputs that are similar to those used to produce the industry's primary product do not need to be redefined. Okay, so industries and IMPLAN and in the Bureau BEA's input-output tables, industries are allowed to produce more than one commodity. They are allowed to have some secondary products, some byproducts that don't get redefined. What is the main distinguishing factor is whether that byproduct or secondary product, using those terms interchangeably here, uses similar input structure or not. That's how they decide whether something needs to be moved out and put into a different industry or left alone. So here are some examples. An example of one that would be left alone is the input requirements for making fluid milk are apparently similar enough to the input requirements for making cheese that the fluid milk industry has as a byproduct cheese production, and there's no redefinitions that happen related to that. So the value of cheese produced by the fluid milk industry is left alone and included as part of the output value of the fluid milk industry. It's not redefined and put into the cheese manufacturing industry. Okay, so what does this mean for IMPLAN data and analysis? Well, IMPLAN follows the BEA practice, and we redefine our annual data in the same way. So after we make all these estimates of output and employment and all of this for all of our industries, right toward the end, before we finalize the IMPLAN data for that year, we hit it with this redefinitions matrix, which shows which proportions of output, employment, labor income, et cetera, from the hotel industry to put into casino industry and to put into restaurant industries and so on and so forth. And there can be redefinitions going in both ways. We might put stuff into the hotel industry from some other industry, or could go in many ways. Okay, so as I already mentioned, many industries in IMPLAN produce more than one commodity. And in those cases, those are the commodities for which the input structure is similar enough to that of the primary product that they don't need to be redefined. Okay. Okay, so why do you as a user care? Well, sometimes users will come to us and they'll have an industry value that differs from IMPLAN's. And many times the difference is largely due to redefinitions. For example, suppose I know that our hotel casino has $2 million in annual revenue, but IMPLAN only shows $1.5 million of output in the hotel sector. Okay, that's because we had to redefine some of that hotel casino activity and put it into the casino sector. So you got to pay attention to that. Another example, redefinitions can actually cause an industry to appear in IMPLAN when it wasn't already there. Like it exists only because of the redefinitions process. So example 2, we don't have any R&D companies in our county, but IMPLAN is showing output employment in the R&D sector. That could be fully due to redefinitions. And so while it might seem strange in this case where you're like, well, wait a minute, IMPLAN data are showing an R&D sector where there really isn't one. Yeah, true, but in order to run impacts and get accurate impact estimates, we want any R&D spending to happen to look like the R&D sector looks like, and buy the things that an R&D sector would buy. So even though in your county it's not actually a separate sector, it's other sectors doing research and development, we want that spending on research and development to happen in a way that looks like the R&D sector. We don't want it to look like buying hospital stuff. We want it to look like buying R&D stuff. So that's why the BEA does it, and we just follow suit. Okay, so it's always a good idea to check the redefinitions spreadsheet, and this is something we have on our website. It's available on our support site, and if you just go to support.implan.com and in the search box type redefinitions, you'll go to this lovely article that actually goes into more detail than I've gone into today, and it has the latest spreadsheet of our redefinitions, and here is actually that URL, and I'll just give you a quick glance of this. Right straight there, and you'll just see that we've got this lovely article all about it, and you can download it here. There's a link, and I think at the bottom there's also a link to it. So there's more things there. There's also the byproducts matrix, and you can have a look at that. In fact, I have it up here in SQL Server, the data teams server here. This just gives you a glance at the byproducts matrix, and I was telling you about fluid milk making cheese. And there you can see it's a very small proportion of what the fluid milk manufacturing sector makes. They make 89, that sector, their industry, makes 89% of what it makes is fluid milk, right? But it makes less than 1% cheese. But the cheese that it does make is allowed to be there as a byproduct. So that's really all I wanted to talk about today. I hope it was helpful, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye now.